Hello, and welcome everybody to the National Trends in Disability Employment,
or nTIDE,
Lunch and Learn series.
Just a few housekeeping items before we begin.
This webinar is being recorded.
We will post an archive of each webinar each month on our website at www.researchondisability.org/nTIDE.
This site will also provide copies of the presentations, the speakers' bios, full transcripts, and other valuable resources.
As an attendee of this webinar, you are a viewer.
To ask questions of the speakers, click on the Q&A box on your webinar screen and type your questions into the box.
Speakers will review these questions and provide answers during the last section of the webinar.
Some questions may be answered directly in the Q&A box.
If you have any questions following this recording, please contact us at disability.statistics@unh.edu
or toll free at 866-538-9521 for more information.
Thanks for joining us.
Enjoy today's webinar.
Hi, everybody. This is Andrew Houghtonville. Thank you for joining us. Happy New Year to all. Today, we're going to look at December's numbers. If you followed the economy today, the reports today, there were good news. Lots of people coming back into the labor market, although the number of people employed was relatively stable. So the Lunch and Learn occurs every noon on the day of the nTIDE release. We release it usually around 10 o'clock. The nTIDE Lunch and Learn is a joint effort of the UNH Institute on Disability, Kessler Foundation, and the Association of Centers on Disability, AUCD. The nTIDE is part of the Rehabilitation Research and Training Center on Employment Policy and Measurement, which is funded by the National Institute on Independent Living, Disability Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research, NIDLR. As we have in previous years, this is the start of the 4th season. We have 3 parts. It'll be the nTIDE monthly report results. John O'Neill and I will present those results. The nTIDE news with Denise Roselle. And then we also are lucky to have a guest speaker, Sara DeMaio from AUCD as well. We have the question and answer at the end of the program. However, you can, as was mentioned earlier, ask questions in the Q&A box. All right. I'm going to turn it over to you, John, to describe the nTIDE report.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Good day, everybody. The monthly nTIDE report is the report, as well as a press release and an infographic that looks at the latest employment statistics. We use data from the jobs report, which is released by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics on the first Friday of each month. And as Andrew had mentioned, this is a joint effort, nTIDE, between the Kessler Foundation and UNH. Next slide, please. The source of the data we use. It comes from the current population survey, which is fielded monthly by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And it is, as most of you know, it's the source of the official unemployment rate, which the press makes so much of. And it's civilians ages 16 to 64 not living in institutions. The data has been available since 2008 onward. That was the year that the Census Bureau included the 6 disability questions, which were not available prior to that. And the data is not seasonally adjusted, and this is why we compare the current month's employment figures to the same month in the last year. Andrew, I think I'll turn it over to you to present the results, the numbers for this month.
Okay, great. So we had a mixed kind of Mixed kind of results. Well, for people with disabilities, not so good results. The employment to population ratio, which is the percentage of people in the population that are employed, so the percentage of people with disabilities who have a job, it actually decreased, John. I may have pasted in the wrong numbers. Or this website didn't save. Oh no. So well, so let me read you the results. This is the first time that this has happened, and it's probably my fault. Let me get the nTIDE report up for today's. I believe if you go to the nTIDE webpage, you can actually pull up the report. The numbers were slightly down for people with disabilities, both the employment to population ratio and the labor force participation rate. The employment to population ratio went down 4/10 of a percent, 4/10 by 4 points. 4/10. For people without disabilities, it actually went up slightly. The employment to population ratio went up about 8 points, not percentage points, but tenths of a percent. So I apologize for the mix-up. The same is true for labor force participation rate. One of the things that, if you paid attention to the news, as I mentioned earlier, there was an increase in the labor force participation from last month, from November to December. If we look at December of 18 to December of 17, the labor force participation rate of people with disabilities went down a couple points, a couple tenths of a point. So it went from 33.8 to 33.5, so 5 tenths. And for people without disabilities, it actually went up a little bit from 76.1 to 76.9, so about 8 tenths of a percent. And so this is kind of disappointing. What you see on the screen is actually last week's numbers, last month's numbers. And so if you see the arrow here, it actually is declining a little bit. So the trend line actually kind of curves over and kind of stays flat for people without disabilities. And so we've kind of seen a cooling off of what was a good run for people with disabilities. So I think we've seen in general a cooling of the economic circumstances of people with disabilities. I wouldn't take this decline as a major signal, but really its rate, it's really not, is kind of indicative of the cooling off we've seen over the last maybe 4 or 5 months. I will update the nTIDE report, and actually I'll try to import the numbers at some point, but we'll fix this PowerPoint slide, the PowerPoint slides, and you can find them on the website when that time is, when they're done. All right. Sorry for the confusion. Hopefully I clarified what happened. I'll turn it over quickly to Denise.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so I'm going to start out by, first thing I'm going to do is say, for those of you who know me and have been listening to me for months, yes, I have a cold. Yes, I have very little voice, but I'm going to push through and, but apologize beforehand. Okay, so we always do a quick federal policy update. Basically, the slide says it, and we start all over again. As of yesterday, there was a brand new Congress sworn in. The Democrats have now control of the House. The Republicans retain control of the Senate. There's a new Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. We start again. So any bills that were introduced and did not pass in the last Congress have to start over. This is the beginning of a new Congress. And I'll talk about a couple of those in a second. For those who have been listening and hoping about what was going on with budget and appropriations during the lame duck, you are probably aware, and I'm sure actually you're all aware, that part of the government is currently shut down. About 25% of the government does not have any funding at this moment. That includes places like the Department of Homeland Security, for instance. Most of the programs that folks on this call care about specific to people with disabilities, I won't say that they're the only things you care about, are funded. Department of Education is funded, they're working. Department of Health and Human Services is funded, they're working. Although as time goes on, we are beginning to hear of things that you wouldn't expect. It just all depends out of what the department, where the department is paid for under the budget. And even those departments that are, quote, shut down, like Department of Homeland Security, people who are essential personnel are still working. That's why when you go to the airport, TSA is still working and they're still screening you into the airport. They're not getting paid at the moment, but they are working. So that's where we are in that. There was a bill last night that the House passed to reopen the government and to do a continuing resolution for one of the departments and to do the final passage on all the other appropriations. Senator McConnell in the Senate has said he's not going to bring that to the floor, so we're at a stalemate. You probably are hearing all about this on your nightly news, your cable news, your newspapers, wherever, your magazines, your social media, wherever you get your news. So I'm not sure I have a lot to add to that. The only thing I will add is that there was in the continuing resolutions during the last Congress, the lame duck session, when we were trying to get beyond this and avoid a shutdown, there was passage of money follows the person. I mean, there was, in the CRs, there was a continuation for money follows the person, and there was a continuation of the spousal impoverishment protections under Medicaid. Because those CRs did not pass, those did not pass. So we start all over again with that as well. As I think that is correct, everything I see. I'll let you know if that's not, but there you go. So that's what we were hoping for the lame duck, didn't happen. So we are now starting all over again on everything and moving forward, and we'll let you know. One of the things you're going to see soon, the Disability Integration Act, I know in the past some of you have asked me about that, is going to be reintroduced in middle of January. They're actually going to do a big reintroduction of it, including house parties around the country and all kinds of things. If you want to know more about that, go to www.disabilityintegrationact.org. Disability Integration Act, for those who aren't familiar, don't remember, whatever, is a bill that is a civil rights bill that basically works. I'm looking down because I thought I had it written there, but I don't see it. It's a civil rights bill that basically is working against or is trying to get insurers to cover long-term services that supports home and community-based services, so that we're working to try to end the institutional bias. It's a great law. It has some of the Mikasa stuff in it from before, some other things that we've tried to get passed over a number of Congresses. It was introduced as the Disability Integration Act in the last Congress. It will be reintroduced as that in this Congress, and we'll start all over again on that as well. I keep telling you to keep a lookout on what's coming in regulations. I keep telling you that, and I will continue to tell you that. One of the things that did not pass in the last Congress were the work limitations that the administration was trying to add on to SNAP, the food stamps program. So those work requirements were not added on to SNAP. However, having said that, there is now a regulation to try to add it administratively. So that's something else to look at. We're still watching for WIO regulations. I still believe we're going to see that in the future. I know I've said that to you over and over again, but there you go. I still think we're going to see it. Keep your eyes open. A variety of organizations here in Washington are getting ready for that. I think that's probably the federal policy update for now. Let's go to the next slide, Andrew. I've got a few other things to tell you about that have popped up. I fixed this. Oh, shoot. Okay, so my slides are messed up too, Andrew. I don't know what happened. Okay, so I'll talk you through it. Harnessing the power of community conversations. That's so weird. Okay, there's a new article in the Journal of Disability Policy, right? Yeah, I can read through that. Disability Policy. I'm going to look at the ones I printed out so that I can tell you better. There's a new article in there.
Show them up on your camera.
That are, I'm not sure if I can find them quickly, I will. Disability Policy, that is harnessing the power of community conversations. I like this because it's 700 conversations that they had in, I believe it's Wisconsin, because Ellie Hartman, who has spoken on this broadcast before about the Promise Grant, who's from Wisconsin Promise, Ellie was involved in this. But they did conversations with parents and teachers and employers, VR counselors, post-secondary representatives, adult service providers, everybody they could think of in the state, asking about ideas for how you can increase integrated employment options. The idea is, obviously under WIOA, we're supposed to be raising expectations for students with significant disabilities. We're supposed to be doing more competitive integrated employment. And the idea is, how do we do that? And if you talk, the idea is to have the conversations with everyone involved to figure out how we can help improve. And I like this a lot because they got a lot of ideas, and I think the article provides a lot of ideas for people who are in other states who are looking at this. They also got some rapid engagement. So just based on these conversations, they got various stakeholders who made changes. They had employers who went out and hired people, students in transition, to say, oh, I didn't know this was important. I didn't know I could do this. Oh, wait a minute. I can hire these kids. They're kids to me. I can hire these kids. And so they actually got some immediate feedback based just on the conversations. I really like this one. We all have a lot of work to do on competitive integrated employment. And in this state, they took it forward. They said, here's what we're going to do, and moved. So I really would recommend you to go to this one. Okay, next one. This one didn't go up at all, right? Okay, I'm going to hold up and see if you can you see my slides? No, you're not going to be able to see it on my camera. Okay.
Actually, Denise, could I interrupt for a moment?
Yep.
We're having some technical difficulty. We're going to fix it, but it may go dark for a couple minutes just for folks.
Okay.
And then we'll be back.
I'll keep talking.
Okay.
That's all right. I can keep talking. The next one I found is called the Disability and Employment. It's like a top 10, like a Casey Kasem for those of you who are old enough, top 10 year in review on workforce GPS. I actually don't spend a lot of time on workforce GPS. It's a Department of Labor, and I should. So Google workforce GPS, it'll come up. It's a Department of Labor employment and training site. So it comes at disability employment not from the disability side, but from the American Job Center, Department of Labor side, and talks about disability. And it's targeted at people with disabilities, employers, the American Job Center folks. And as we all know, the American Job Centers are supposed to be funding and serving folks with disabilities through the job centers. Doesn't always work well, I would be the first one to say, but they're supposed to be. And this is a site on there targeted to them. And I really like the things they have up there. So I would first of all send you there. And then when you get there, look for something called the Top 10 Disability Community and Practice Site Visits. Just do top 10, it'll come up. And what they have is the top 10 places that people have visited on their site during the year on disability employment. There's one, and it's really interesting what people are looking for, but it also highlights some things they have up there that, at least for me, I didn't know was there. There's one on apprenticeships, which I am really focusing on these days. Ooh, look at that. That was my new slide that's beginning to come back up. There's one on disability resources for WIOA practitioners. There was one on dual customer focus, meaning AJCs, employment, people with disabilities, all of the above. There's one on workplace resources for mental health. If you flip one more slide, I think I'm caught up. Or back one, maybe. Back one. Okay. So I would say, there you go. It's this one. Perfect. They're out of order now, but they're the right slides. So anyway, go to Disability Workforce GPS, look for the slides. There's some really good information there. And then the top 10 had a particularly good list of things that I think we can all use. things that, again, a couple of them that I can use right now in some of the work I'm doing on transitions. So there you go. Next one. Next slide. Okay, that one we talked about. That was the community conversations. Okay, coming across my desk this month, some of these are newer than others, but I had a series of things about employer perspectives, and they all have kind of a common thread. So there are three of them. The first two on this slide are about, the first one is new, actually, in the Journal of Occupational Rehab, interviews with HR professionals in Arkansas, so it's targeted to one state. And this is from NPR, looking for key factors on accommodation and retention. As you would imagine, this is the thing that's similar. In the next one, it's a comparative study of academic research and industry publications about disability employment, kind of the demand side versus the supply side perspectives. And both of these, the common denominator, probably not to any great surprise to us, is that the things that HR professionals are saying or believing, or that the things that are in industry publications, do not represent what we know is best practice, do not represent evidence-based practices that we are seeing in the academic research of what works. I think what this tells us is that we have more work to do with those communities. It says to me I need to make an appointment with the people over at SHRM to talk about that again and figure out how we can, which is the Association of HR Professionals, to again say, okay, here's what we know is best practice. How can we share best practice information with you? So I think we have more work to do, but it's interesting to me that the demand side and the supply side, that is, the employers and the people with disabilities and those of us who are doing the academic work, looking at this, are clearly not speaking the same language yet. Like I said, I'm not sure that's a surprise to anybody on the call, but here are two places that you can use as background information if you're going out to an employer and saying, no, this is what really is best practice, and here's what the academic research says, and here's why what you're doing, I'm sure you wouldn't be so blunt as to say, is wrong, but here's what the academic research shows and why this works better. I also like the fact the second one was in American Behavioral Scientists, which is, again, a different kind of a publication, not just disability focused. Okay, and the next slide, Andrew, this one is similar. This one has to do specifically with return to work following depression. As we know, there's lots of work being done, particularly by the Department of Labor, on return to work, stay at work, return to work. And this one looks specifically at what accommodations do employers and human resources directors put in place when a person returns to work following an episode of depression. And they looked at the accommodations, and again, the accommodations were very work-focused, scheduling, work, very specific work stuff, not the relational things or stakeholder environment, stakeholder priority or supervisor priorities or accommodations were not prioritized at all. And that actually conflicts with best practices as well. Part of what we know is that folks coming back into the workplace following an episode of depression, part of what they need is those relational accommodations or supports, whether it's with supervisors or other colleagues. And that's not what's happening. So again, I think for folks to take this as you're working, either as you're working directly with individuals coming back into the workforce, or as we're talking about this whole return to work priority that is on a lot of our minds these days, and frankly, which is being funded by a lot of folks at the department and in the administration. This is another good one to remember. Okay, next slide. Intelligent lives. So I'm kind of assuming that folks have heard something about the Intelligent Lives Project. If not, you can go to intelligentlives.org. There's all kinds of stuff about Dan Habib's newest longer film, which is called Intelligent Lives. Dan is a filmmaker, works with the Institute on Disability, University of New Hampshire. He also did his first film that lots of people know is Including Samuel, which had to do with his son Samuel and inclusion in schools, etc. Well, Dan has a series of 4 new films with discussions guides on post-secondary transition. They're free, they're online, they're short, like 16 to 18 minutes, and they're really well done. All Dan's stuff is well done. These are new, and particularly for folks on this call, we talk so much about transition. One of them focuses on promise. Again, we had somebody from the Promise Projects on this call about maybe as much as a year ago, Ellie Hartman. So there's one from a student who's in Promise, but they're also talking, they talk to higher ed, they talk to linguistic competence, and they're told through specific stories of individuals. Again, Dan tells to tell his stories through individuals. They're really well done, they're short. I hope people go up and download them and use them for everything you can think of. I can imagine them being used in parent groups, in student groups, in provider groups, by VR counselors when you're talking about specific things. They don't take that long, they're easy and they're free, and there's even discussion guides attached. This is a big one, and I'm really excited about it. So I really said you go look at them and watch them, and then if you don't know anything about Intelligent Lives or Dan or including Samuel, you can go look at that too. So so that's that. Oh, that's perfect. Next one, there's a forum. So this is MPR, Mathematica Policy Research, is doing a forum. They're doing it in person, but they're also broadcasting it live online, so you can sign up and watch it. And knowing Mathematica, it'll also be recorded and put up online. It's here in DC on January 24th. It's specifically about cultural responsiveness in research. I've raised a couple of articles on these calls about this in the past, about work that's being done in this arena. But this is going to be a conversation. You know, you can't do things to communities, you have to do them with the communities. You know, how do you do that? As my friend Liz Weintraub says, my colleague Liz Weintraub says, as the folks from ADAPT say, as the disability community in general says, nothing about us without us. So we've got to be including people with disabilities as well as other cultural competence in the research we do. And as I understand what they're going to be doing at Mathematica, they're going to be looking at examples of this, practical strategies researchers can use, and then having some conversation and networking afterwards. So if you're in DC, there's actually going to be a networking session afterwards that looks like it's going to be fabulous. If you're not, I urge you to tune in. You can register. The link is there, or if the link doesn't open for some reason, it should under forum. Go to NPR and just search for it, and it'll be up there. Okay, next one. I think it's a webinar. Yeah, webinar. So AUCD, the organization I work for, is doing an Autism SIG. Our special interest group has an Autism special interest group that is doing a series of webinars this year, this early part of the year. And the first one I thought might be interested to people on this call. I know I have a lot of transition stuff right now today. I have to say part of that is because so much funding is going into transition. Again, look at WIOA. But this one is on transition and autism spectrum disorder, specifically by some folks who are experts in that. So this is the first of a series. You can go either to the link, again, up on the webinar, and there's a link there, or you can go specifically to, specifically to the AUCD website, search for the Autism SIG or search for the title. Anybody can register for it. You don't have to be a member of the Autism SIG. If you want to be a member of the Autism SIG, you can be. It's not limited to AUCD. But some really good people who are doing good work in this area are going to be doing it. There are the people listed. So I thought that might be something people were interested in. Next one.
Hey, there we are.
What do you know? Okay, so this one is, as you can see, save the date, coming up in February. I'll be there. Andrew will be. Lots of people from this call will be there. Registration's still open. This is on. This is the State of the Science and then the Disability Statistics Compendium event. Y'all come. It's always a really good time for talking about. I find it really useful, as I've said before, I'm the policy geek. I'm not the research geek. So I find it a really nice way to talk with folks who are the research geeks to figure out how we make policy and practice and research all fit together. That's my joy and part of what I'm most excited about these days in my world. So that's it. Next slide. I am going to introduce our speaker, I think. Yes, I am. So I am thrilled that Sara DeMaio is here. Sara is a colleague of mine at AUCD, the Association of University Centers on Disability. She's a project manager here and does a bunch of stuff. She has TA for the LEND programs or for the DBP, the Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics networks that we staff and support. But the other thing Sarah's been doing most recently, she's the project director for a professional fellows program on inclusive disability employment, PFPIDE. She provides oversight and leadership to the fellows program, which brings 20 mid-career professionals that we call fellows from Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda to the U.S. to study best practices in advancing inclusive employment for individuals with disabilities. We have had some phenomenal people come in, be placed, and she'll talk more about this, but some phenomenal people I've been really lucky enough to meet who have been doing amazing things in Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya on disability employment, coming here to learn and then to take that message back and do projects in their own countries. So I thought you guys might be interested to hear more about that. I am going to turn it over to Sara and let her run with it. Are you there, Sara?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me? I'm gonna guess.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so thank you, Denise, for that introduction. I'm very excited to be sharing some information about this project, which is near and dear to my heart, and I think is doing some really good work. I know that some of the past comments on this call have highlighted how much work we have to do in improving employment for people with disabilities in our country, but I think this is an opportunity to really celebrate how far we've come and share that information and knowledge on the global stage to help other countries and people doing work in other countries to learn from our past missteps and from our past successes. So if you go to the next slide. As Denise said, I am Sara DeMaio, and I work at AUCD, and I am the PI on this project. I work very closely with Siddharth Nagaraj, who is a senior program specialist at AUCD and helps to implement this project as well. So if you're interested in getting involved in this project, you'll be coordinating with one or both of us. Thank you. Next slide. To start, I have a little disclaimer. The PFP-IDE program is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State with funding provided by the U.S. government and administered by AUCD in partnership with the Institute for Community Inclusion at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, or ICI, and Humanity and Inclusion, which is was formerly known as Handicap International, or HI. However, the content of this presentation does not reflect the opinion of the United States Department of State, the United States, or its officers or employees. Thank you. Next slide. So what I'm going to talk about today is first give a little bit of background and context to the program, talk about the structures that support the work that we do and the way that the project is designed. We'll talk a little bit about some of the outcomes that we've seen both here in the United States and abroad, and then share how people can get involved in this project. Next slide. So our project is one of 14 professional fellows programs that are funded by the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, which is also known as ECA at the U.S. Department of State. Together, those 14 professional fellows programs bring 450 participants from 45 countries to the U.S. every year. So we are one of a cohort of programs. Those programs are very diverse and focus on a range of different topics from improving the civil society, strengthening journalism. So they're really diverse programs involving a really diverse set of fellows from around the world. Our program's focus is on economic empowerment and the priority area that the State Department set around employment. So because of the nature of our specific program, we also work very closely with the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor at the State Department, and specifically their International Disability Rights team. So we're lucky to be partnering with both of those different departments at the State Department. So 2 years ago, we worked with ECA and the International Disability Rights team to put together what's sort of like a what was at the time sort of like a pilot project, which was known as the ADA International Fellowship. And that program ran for 1 year during the calendar year 2017. It focused more on inclusive education and served some slightly different countries than the current program did. They brought fellows from Tanzania, Kenya, Brazil, and Peru. But that was an opportunity to develop this model that we have now brought to bear on inclusive employment, and has been really well received by our partners, both in our network and in the federal government. Next slide. So what is the model? Well, like all professional fellows programs, it's an exchange program. So in 2 semi-annual cycles, one in the fall and one in the spring, we bring a total of 20 fellows who are mid-career professionals, so between the ages of 25 and 40, from Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda to the United States. So 10 each cycle come. They are then matched with AUCD network members or network partners who serve as host sites for training that is offered in the 5-week US fellowship. After they return home from their 5-week experience in the United States, a small subset of their host sites are selected in a competitive process to participate in a 2-week Outbound Exchange. So we select 4 out of the 8 to 10 host sites that host fellows in each cycle, so 8 annually, to travel to the countries that their fellows hailed from to provide additional support. And I'll talk a little bit more both about what they do in the Outbound Exchange and how we select the candidates to travel. Next slide. So the central feature for the entire project is, or the entire program, are fellowship projects that are conceptualized, designed, and implemented by the foreign fellows. Fellows are asked to articulate a proposed project all the way back in their first initial written application, and we select candidates based on the quality of their proposed project and how they articulate the impact that will have on their community. Those projects range really significantly across the spectrum of what you might think of as an inclusive employment initiative. Some are very service-oriented, developing an initiative or implementing a model that they have seen in the United States, and they want to bring that to their home countries. Others are looking at research initiatives, data collection and analysis, legislative processes, you know, a real wide range of interventions to address issues around inclusive employment, and that is construed relatively broadly. So after the fellows articulate what their vision is for their project, we select them in a competitive process. We usually have about 250 applicants that we narrow down to 10 finalists. So it's really the cream of the crop of people who have already accomplished some significant things in their home countries and are looking to then grow and learn and expand the impact that they've already had. and they are matched based on their project proposal with a host site. So that is, again, a semi-competitive process, or it's a filtering that we do. We ideally will have a wide range of host sites available that we could then have an individualized match for the fellows in supporting their personal goals. So then they are matched with the fellow, with their host sites and the mentors at their host sites. And then for the entire duration of their fellowship training here in the United States, they hone that vision, that project vision, into a project plan that they will then implement during the 6 months that they, following the return to their home countries. So next slide. So while they're here in the United States, it's a 5-week program, but they're only at their host sites for 4 weeks, because the first day and a half, 2 days after they arrive in the United States, they participate in a program orientation in Washington, D.C. This is an opportunity for fellows to connect with one another and network with each other, because they're frequently coming from different countries, different regions within their countries, but they're working on similar initiatives. So having that connection with one another can help implement broader initiatives as they're looking to expand their work. But it's also kind of a crash course for them on all of the program logistics, the disability employment rights laws that exist in the United States and the histories of those laws, a crash course on project planning and the various mechanisms that we utilize in the United States that are kind of culturally bound around how to, set up SMART goals and things like that. So we give them that orientation, and then they travel to their host sites for a 4-week placement where they get some, hopefully will get hands-on experiences in the skills that they're looking to build. They get mentorship. Because this is both an educational experience but also a cultural exchange, they're required to participate in volunteerism and service activities and cultural engagements, so like going to football games or Easter egg hunts and things like that. And then they're also weekly, while they're at their host sites, participating in video conferencing with their fellow cohort members in a weekly seminar where they're sharing their lessons learned and what they've been engaged with their supervisors and peers on site. Then for the last week of the program, they come back to Washington, D.C. to participate in a closing workshop, and then to gather with all of the professional fellows, all 450 other professional fellows that are in the country, that are from different regions around the world, to share their experience. And that's called the Professional Fellows Congress, and is in Washington, D.C. Next slide. So after the fellows return home is when the hosts may apply to take part in an outbound exchange program. So hopefully they've been working with their fellows over the course of their fellowship to kind of brainstorm ways that the expertise and skills of the host mentor could be utilized to help implement the project that the fellow is envisioning in their home country. And then they can submit an outbound exchange application after the fellow returns home to implement a project, kind of a narrower technical assistance project or mentoring activity in country. So they apply for this 2-week trip to go to the fellow's home country, and the timeline and itinerary of that exchange are entirely determined by the hosts and fellows in coordination, and is supposed to be based on the needs of the individual fellowship experience, the individual fellowship project that the now alumni fellow who's returned home will be implementing in that 6-month period. But it has to occur, the outbound exchange has to occur within that 6-month window. Next slide. So this is just a quick timeline for 2019. We have 2 cohorts, one in the spring, the dates are there, the fall dates are also there. The fellows for the spring cohort are already in the semifinalist stage of selection, so that we should have a list of our final 10 by the end of this month, and the fall fellows will be selected in July. Next slide. So some of the great outcomes that we've been seeing, and remember, this is the end of our first year implementing this project, but we've already been seeing quite a significant impact in a range of areas as the fellows have returned and now have completed the spring cohort from 2018 has now completed their 6-month follow-on projects and have some great things to report out, as both scholarly and non-scholarly papers and articles have been published. They've been asked to make a number of media appearances on the radio and television. There's one who is in the process of writing a book, another who's given a TEDx talk. They've been involved, they've been increasingly involved in systems change initiatives, working with the National Council for Persons with Disabilities and the Coalition for Inclusive Employment in their countries. They've been meeting with high-level officials and ministries and have really significant project outcomes with regard to, continuation of their projects, with grants being secured, continued replication and adaptation of their projects around their communities, and significant number of people with disabilities who've been recruited to participate in these employment initiatives and mentored toward employment. Next slide. But equally, every time we do an evaluation, we hear, the impact on the U.S. is at least as significant in the U.S. communities, is at least as significant as those that we're seeing in our African partner communities. So we've heard a lot of the host mentors talk about the increase in cross-cultural skills and competency for themselves and their colleagues and their program. I have just a few snippets of quotes that come from our follow-up interviews that we've done with hosts. We've seen a number of programs who are formalizing longer-term partnerships with MOUs or collaborative grant applications. We've seen programs talk about the fact that having this fellow in their program has motivated them to do outreach to partners and build and coalition building that they hadn't, it hadn't been a priority up to that point, but that they have seen a lot of positive impacts just from that. The outreach to their community partners, the local community partners, and the ties that they've been building across agencies locally. And then obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning, people talk about attitudinal shifts where we, sometimes get down in the dumps about how frustrating these things are, that we're working on them year after year. But really learning that, we might take for granted the long, slow progress that we have made. As much as it's not great that we only have 30% of people with disabilities employed, we have made progress. So the next slide. And I know I'm running a little over, so I'm gonna—
No, you're fine.
But all of this information is on the website, which you can see on the slide. How you can get involved is, number one is that we're always looking for our host sites who have skills that they can share with fellows. If you're interested, if you could apply by January 30th, that's when we're hoping to make the matches. If you go to the next slide, the host responsibilities are pretty basic, mentorship and space and support. The goal is that there wouldn't be any direct financial expense to you or your programs, because we fund all of the food, lodging, transportation, et cetera, that the fellows would need while at the host site. Next slide. But hopefully there's quite a lot of benefits. As you've already heard in previous slides, this is really an opportunity to build relationships, showcase your expertise, and leverage it to make an impact on the global stage. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So we're going to open it up to questions, and let's see. There are already a couple that have been posted on the through Zoom. When would Cameroon be considered in your programs?
So the countries that we work with are determined by the State Department based on needs as identified by the embassies there, and I'm sure like a whole bunch of other factors that we're not aware of. So we don't determine which countries. It's true that we have changed countries in the past, and we may change countries again in the future. So I can't say that for sure. But
how many countries are done per year?
So right now we're working with 3.
Yeah.
Last year we worked with, well, in 2017 we worked with 4. It's my hope that we don't change countries too often, because we're kind of in the process of building a system of support in those countries, and if we can get a critical mass of alumni and fellows who have engaged in this work together, they can have a greater impact working together. So I don't want to, as much as I would love, we'd love to work with a lot of, there's a lot of need in the world.
Perhaps the way to say it is that it would be great to expand the number of countries.
It would be great to expand the number of countries.
And where would people go if they were interested in talking? Would they come to you, or are there other people they could potentially talk to about adding a country? Is there a State Department lead?
About adding a country, we could certainly, we have passed that information along to our project officers and program officers at the State Department, and will pass along the interest in adding Cameroon into the mix.
Okay, good. And so the follow-up is kind of, when is the selection process, kind of the timing of these kinds of things?
So
to get a country added would probably be as soon as possible to get the ball rolling. But in terms of the selection of when applications for both fellows and sponsors sites, when are these? When's the timing?
So the fellows and sponsors will hopefully be so the fellows will be identified by the end of this month. It is our goal to have, when the fellows are identified, to be able to move pretty quickly and place them with host sites. So we encourage people to submit an application before the end of January. If we don't have the right matches, we will continue to leave the application open. So as long as the application is open on our website, you could submit an application. Right. And you can reach out to me or check the website to find out if it's still open. The goal is to have all of the hosts identified by the end of January, but it may be mid-February if we're still looking for the right candidates, because we do put a priority on matching, having a good match between the fellows and the host sites to really maximize the skills and expertise.
Yeah, I would recommend that people call, no matter what, contact you, whether they submit an application this year or not, because if folks are interested, you may have a need for other places as the year goes on. Yeah.
And, we keep a running list of people who've expressed an interest in the program. And so if you're not able to host in the spring because you know that, you would be the mentor and you have a work trip that's right in the middle, you can still let us know that you're interested, and we'll follow up with you in the fall to make sure that you're still interested and see if it might work for you in that time frame, or next spring to see if that works better.
So another person asked maybe for a little more detail about to learn more about how this program creates mentoring opportunities, probably both in terms of the match, how things are matched, and how opportunities are developed for mentoring.
Sure. So So the fellows identify what their interests are when they submit an application, and we explore that a little bit more through the selection process, because we do an in-person interview or a remote interview, depending on the fellow's accommodation needs and access issues. But with our partner who is in-country HI staff to those interviews in Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda, they give us the information that kind of fleshes out what the fellows are interested in, looking for, what their skills already are. And then we ask similar questions of hosts when they submit an application. You know, what types of employment opportunities and expertise would you offer to fellows as a host site? And so then we utilize those responses to make a match between fellows. It's a really nice opportunity for people to gain some leadership skills and mentoring experience, because, you know, a lot of times it might be, you know, obviously you would need your program director or center director to sign off on that, because you'll be utilizing some of your time to coordinate activities. But anybody can mentor. You don't have to be a program director or PI on a grant to mentor a fellow, as long as you bring some skills and expertise to the table. And a lot of programs kind of share the mentoring experience. So, you know, a fellow, for example, in Colorado this last year, it was actually a partnership between their USED and their DD Council. Was the application was a partnership application. So, you know, the USED said, well, we can offer these things and the DD Council can offer those things. And so together we're going to jointly mentor this fellow. So we're flexible in the mentoring models. As long as usually, you know, we have to have one primary point of contact that we can go to, but
Sure.
But a lot of programs have their fellows follow or shadow a whole bunch of different staff to get experience in the range of programs that are available at their center or program.
Great. We had a question about the website address. I've moved this PowerPoint slides to the page with. Is this the website? The
Yes.
PFP. And so this is the website where they can find this information.
I can put it in the chat box as well, so people have it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. In terms of is there, you know, so this is the spring, are there opportunities to meet are you going to have like a meeting or is there going to be a conference or something where people could meet your fellows?
Sure, yeah, and I didn't mention this, but another way to get involved if you're not able to host a fellow, but you want to have a connection, is to participate in the orientation. We're always looking for new speakers who can add information about disability rights laws and employment laws and how the system operates in the United States, and break that down for people who are really, really new to our systems. So if that's something that appeals to you, we certainly welcome people to participate in that and share your expertise in that way. And then in the past, we have not had external people participating in the closing workshop. At the last session, we had a couple of, it happened to coincide with our conference, the AACB conference, and we had some external people participating and got some really positive feedback. So we're going to be exploring whether that's a possibility in the future.
Even if it's just meeting them at a dinner or something, you know.
Yeah.
Andy can host a dinner at his house and invite everybody.
Yeah, he's not on.
Or Denise. Come on, Denise. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. This has been very helpful. It's exciting to see international things and international opportunities to share things with others. International research has really been very limited over the years. It seemed to kind of go away in the 90s. Kind of the financial support for research on an international basis. But it was great to hear about your program, and good luck, and let us know if we can push out any more information to our listeners.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, so thank you everybody for coming. I've put up the web address and everything, and so long. have a good rest of the year, at least until February.